Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions today, please type them into the Q&A icon located at the bottom toolbar, and we'll answer them at the end of each presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. I'd like to welcome everybody to the May 24th edition of Crop Talk. And today we have Megan and Ron on today, and they work for the land survey or soil survey part of Manitoba Agriculture. And we thought it was going to be a good opportunity to learn a little bit more about what they do, how they can, the information they're collecting can help you on your farm, and just other things that you might be planning on doing to improve your operation. So I thought it'd be good to get them to come on, kind of go through what they do, where they're doing their work, and just to kind of explain the process. So we're going to start with that, and then from there we're going to go into a little bit of an update as to how things have gone over the past week. And then our crop scouting panel, there's been some questions coming in, and actually my phone just dinged because another question just came in just now. So we'll have some questions for the crop scouting panel a little bit later. So with that, I'd like to ask Megan to grab the screen here, Megan, and you can start on with your presentation.
Great, thank you, Lionel, and thank you both you and Lori for having us on today and letting us share the work that we're doing here within the province. All right, can everybody see my screen?
You bet.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Megan Westfall. I'm a soil survey specialist with Manitoba Agriculture. Also on the line today is Rongwei Wu, or Ron. He is also a soil survey specialist with Manitoba Agriculture as well. And today we're just going to give an overview on how our soil survey activities and the detailed soil surveys we produce can be used for agriculture, land use planning, and many other applications. All right, so we'll get right into it. So I'll start off with explaining what a soil survey essentially is. So it is a inventory of the properties of the soil, characterizing the soil's texture, the internal drainage, parent material, depth to groundwater. We also characterize the landscape when we conduct our soil surveys, so determining the topography of the area. Other things we classify as degree of erosion, if there's any stoniness present, as well as if there's any salinity present. We also take samples back to the lab and determine things and determine soil characteristics such as soil pH, as well as if there's any carbonates present as well. So as we conduct these soil surveys, we also classify the spatial distribution of these soils over the landscape, which is then often portrayed in the map. So this is really important and to determine each, or I guess our soils, because each soil type will have a unique set of physical, chemical, and mineralogical characteristics that has different behaviors, limitations, and potentials under different uses. So soil scientists or pedologists, we conduct a soil survey in order to learn what kind of soils and soil-like materials are in an area, where they're located, and their ecological relationships and how they can be used. The purpose is to produce a soil map in the end, which is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional landscape, as we can see here in this image. As we can see, denoted by the different colors, each area, each color will have a different soil type that'll react differently to different management practices. Our data has been gathered and distributed over this map and is used to predict and forecast the behavior of these soils for various uses and their responses to certain management. So here in Manitoba, we have a long and deep history conducting soil surveys, with reconnaissance soil surveys beginning almost 100 years ago, back in 1926. One of the first Manitoba agriculture soil survey specialists developed a system of field soil classification that was crucial into developing the Canadian system of soil classification that we still use today to classify our soils here in Manitoba and all across Canada. These reconnaissance surveys were very, I guess, small map scale, was mapped at a very small scale, and really generally only provides information on soils across a region, and designates soils only at the association level, which contains a sequence of related soils across the landscape. So as I mentioned, really only provides general information on these soils across a region, and not too much information that really allows us to use at the farm scale. Which was realized over time. So as the intensification of agriculture increased, advancement in technology, we realized that these reconnaissance soil surveys weren't quite giving us enough information to be able to predict the soils management at more of a farm scale level. So in the 1970s, detailed soil surveys began here in Manitoba, and this involved conducting more soil inspection pits per area to provide more detailed landscape and soil information. And then soil designations can be made at the soil series level, which are those individual soils at different topographic points within the landscape. And then this information can be used more at a farm scale rather than across a broad regional scale. So with more inspection pits per area, so in our detailed soil surveys, we conduct, depending on at what scale we're doing them at, 16 to 34 inspection pits per section of land, compared to the reconnaissance survey, where only about 6 inspection pits were conducted per section of land. These more inspection pits provide more detailed area about the landscape, soil information, as well as soil designations that can be made to the series level, which provides, sorry, I'm getting mixed up here, more information that can be used at the farm scale again, rather than regional. As we can see here, this is a reconnaissance map on the, I guess, left, with a detailed map on the right. And even in a level landscape like here in the Red River Valley, this detailed soil survey can really captures the variability that we see even in this flat landscape compared to at the reconnaissance level. So with this detailed, more detailed information, it also gives us greater confidence for determining the land's agriculture capability, as well as other land use designations. So you may think, yeah, we're conducting so many soil inspection pits, and you may have seen the pits that we dig at crop tours and extension events over the years. However, the ones that we dig are not that big. We do not go and dig 32 very large pits across the landscape. We understand that that landowners put a lot of care and cost goes into maintaining their land and producing their crops. So our soil inspection pits, very minimal disturbance is made. They're usually around 30 centimeters in diameter. We'll dig with a spade to about 50 centimeters and then auger down to 1 meter, pulling up soil cores in 10 or 15 centimeter increments. These fields are usually walked as well, and minimal disturbance is conducted or handled, sorry. So from these soil inspection pits, once they're all mapped and data is collected across the fields, these inspection pits are then grouped and mapped into different, what we call soil polygons, and then a map unit is assigned. So a map unit is a symbol on a survey map that represents the type of soil found within a particular soil polygon here, as you can see on the screen. There are generally 2 different types of map units you will come across. And on the right here, it gives a brief overview on how to read these soil map units. So you can see on the top here, we have the soil series symbol. And then below is what we call the soil phase, which will show you the degree of erosion, the topography of the land, if there's any stones present, as well as the degree of salinity. So if there's just one soil series present, this would be called a simple map unit. However, there can be more than one soil series present within a soil polygon. This would be called a compound map unit, and the percentages of those and the percentage of the land for each soil series is designated by the little numbers up top here. So we can see for the soil map unit here, we have a soil polygon that contains 80% inwood soil and a 20% Maleb soil. And then also to find out, to read more about these soil series, we also have a soil series description document available on our website, which I will showcase later on in this presentation. So yeah, it's really important, knowing your soil types here. It can really help you determining various different parts of your farming operations, such as help determining which crops can be grown in an area. So if you're looking at your soil map and you have maybe a poorly or imperfectly or poorly drained area, you may want to think about different types of crops that can be grown or that prefer imperfectly or poorly drained soils. It can, based on the internal drainage or maybe the texture or the position in the landscape for that soil. It can also give you an insight onto different management practices that might be required or not required based on the topography or the soil textures within the area. As well, it can also give you an insight into the soil fertility based on the soil texture within the area, maybe the parent material, and if it's a organic or maybe a PD soil as well. These maps are published online, which I will also show you later where they can be found, but these soil maps are very useful for different types for your management and nutrient planning. You can turn on and off different layers and look at a soil texture map, and you can plan out different management zones or nutrient management zones based on the soil texture in the area. Same with salinity. We also provide a soil salinity area, and you could plan out management zones or nutrient planning based on soil salinity. And we also provide agriculture capability maps, which is an interpretation made from all this detailed soil survey data that we collect. So then you could also potentially plan out different soil management zones based on the different agricultural capability interpretation for that land. So interpretations are different, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, or I guess refers to the soil's behavior and response to different human activities. So because of all the detailed information we're collecting and from all the research that has been conducted and what we've seen from our management practices over the years, we can make these interpretations that can be used to predict the soil's potentials and limitations under different uses. So these interpretations are standardized and have been developed over time by many different I guess stakeholders, so producers, researchers, as well as government organizations. And these interpretations allow us to determine appropriate land use and management for our soils here. So in our reports, we provide a few interpretations. The one that's been mentioned quite a bit is agricultural capability, which is a 7-class rating of mineral soils based on the severity of limitations for dryland farming. The system does not rate the productivity of the soil. We'd like to emphasize that, but rather its capability to sustain agricultural crops based on the limitations due to different soil properties and landscape features, which are lined out in the table lined out on the table here. as well as climate is also taken into consideration for agricultural capability. The system is usually applied on a soil polygon basis, and the individual soil series are assessed, and the maps portray the condition represented by the dominant soil within the polygon. So here's an example from the RM of DeSalary and the agricultural capability map that is developed from the different soil series and phases found within the area. So this table is used by the different limitations that we see within our soils based on, as I mentioned, soil properties such as texture and topography. So say, for example, if we have a Newdale soil map unit with with no erosion, a class C topography, no stones, and no salinity, we would go down this list, the subclass limitation list, and then follow the rows to where we would see the most limiting factor, and then the most limiting factor denotes what agriculture capability that soil map unit would have. Our reports also provide irrigation suitability interpretation, which is a general suitability rating for irrigated crop production. The classification system considers both soil and landscape characteristics, as lined out in the tables here. And these characteristics include texture, drainage, depth to water table, as well as salinity, topography, stoniness, and then ranks them in terms of their quality due to long-term management under irrigation. However, this interpretation does not consider factors such as water availability, as well as water quality or economics of this type of land use. It's just determining a general suitability of the land for irrigation use. Another interpretation that we provide is for irrigated potato production. This is also a rating, is a 5-class evaluation of soil properties and landscape features that are important for irrigated potato production here in Manitoba, with class 1 soils being the most suitable and class 5 being the least. And soil properties that are considered for this interpretation are texture, drainage, salinity, acidicity, topography, as well as stoniness. So these interpretations are all compiled into generalized interpretive maps that are found in our reports. However, if you're hoping to go more in depth and find more information at a section or quarter section level, these maps are also available online, which I will show you later in this presentation where those can be found. There are a few other agricultural operation applications as well. These soil maps and soil data can also be used for precision farming activities. These maps are also potentially one of the first resources people or companies installing tile drainage will potentially use to determine if a field is suitable for tile drainage, and also gives them an idea of what the types of soils they'll be working with. These maps and soil data is also used a lot for academic research, so helping develop different models for, say, water movement through the soil and things of that nature. Our data and soil maps can also be used and are heavily used in developing that can be used to develop your environmental farm plan. So the soil data is very useful to aid in determining suitable yard sites, as well as for fertilizer and manure storage facilities and different storage facility selections as well. It can also help you determine and define soil management zones within your operation and identify high and low risk areas for soil properties such as soil salinity or high risk or low risk areas for erosion. Our detailed soil data is also our soil survey data is also important in providing accurate and detailed data to provide egg capability ratings that are used in regulations here in Manitoba, with one of them being the nutrient management regulation, where egg capability class is one of the factors to determine the different nutrient zones, as well as the livestock manure and mortalities management regulation. Our detailed soil survey data and interpretations are used in that regulation as well. So having a more detailed and greater confidence in our egg capability interpretations is really important when we're working with these regulations. Our detailed soil survey data is also used by MASC, where they developed a soil productivity index. This is different from agriculture capability ratings, as this productivity index incorporates soil data, but also looks at yield history and risk area, and is also calculated on a 10-year moving average. So it's a little bit different from those egg capability ratings. Our soil survey data is also used used extensively for land use planning here in Manitoba, which is legislated by the Planning Act and is guided by 9 provincial land use policy areas, or what they call the PLUPs. One of those policy areas is for agriculture, and this policy area is designated there to help protect agricultural land for present and future food production, also help protect agricultural operations from encroachment and disturbance by land uses that are not compatible, and keep this land intact by minimizing fragmentation. So this policy area designates prime agricultural land and viable lower agricultural land for agricultural use, and protects it for all those different reasons mentioned on the previous slide. And the egg capability, soil capability for agriculture interpretation informs what is defined as prime agricultural land and viable lower agricultural land. So prime agricultural land is defined as classes 1 through 3, whereas viable lower class agricultural land is class 4 and 5. And this also includes for livestock operations as well. The soil capability for agriculture interpretations are important in the land use planning for those operations. Our soil data and maps are also used for watershed planning here within Manitoba. So we also have the Water Protection Act, which specifies basic content for integrated watershed management, for an integrated watershed management plan to guide sustainable resource management. And these plans include our soil data, such as soil texture, our agriculture capability ratings, as well as areas that may be prone to wind and water erosion. Our reports also contain quite a few other interpretations, as well as a few interpretations for selected engineering and recreational uses, such as topsoil, sand and gravel extraction, as well as other recreational uses such as camping areas or suitability for paths and trails. These maps can also be used for reclamation purposes, where if a sand or aggregate extraction pit is ready to be reclaimed, they can look at these soil maps, find the soil series and the phase, go to our soil series description, document and read about the soil that was originally found in the area, and then they can use that description to help reclaim the soil to its to what it was originally. So yeah, our detailed soil data is a great resource and is available free for everyone, which I will get to very shortly. But I just want to provide a quick update on our current status for conducting our detailed soil surveys here in Manitoba. As we can see in South Central, South Central, and Southwest, we have quite a few of our RMs have been, detailed soil surveys have been completed at the 1 to 50,000 or 1 to 20,000 scales, with a pretty good sized chunk as well done in the east. And we are currently surveying in the RM of Broken Head as well as in the RM of Sifton for this field season of 2023 here, as well as we are working on our reports for the rural municipality of Souris Glenwood and the rural municipality of Oakland Wawanesa. So those will hopefully be released soon. So as I mentioned multiple times, this is a I guess free and publicly available resource for everyone here. You can find our technical reports, which contain those generalized maps, as well as a summary of the soils found in the area at our Government of Manitoba's Soil Survey website. These maps are also available to download, one at multiple websites, with our newest one being Data MB, where you can now isolate an area of interest and download the specific soil information within that area of interest, and will be very useful and moving forward. Another option to look at our soils data is AgriMaps, which is an online interactive map that can be used to look at our different soil layers. There's also the Manitoba Land Initiative website where our soil maps are there to download, not just for ArcGIS, but also if you have Google Earth, there are those KMZ files as well. And then another option to look and find our soils data is the land map viewers Manitoba Agriculture has, and looking at the soils viewer map there. And with that, yeah, thank you. And if there's any questions, we're open to questions.
Okay, Megan, if you want to go back a couple slides there when you were showing where to find it on the website. All right, go back one more. Sorry, ahead one more. There. Okay, so if a producer was wanting to do a manure management plan and needed to know the soil capability, I guess is what's required for that, what would be the best map or place to go to find that?
So for that, I would say at this point, I haven't played around. So the Data MB portal is very new. I still have to work with that a little bit more to determine the best way to download areas of interest and sort through the different layers. But AgriMaps is still, I would say, the best area to go to. So you go to the AgriMaps website, you can type in your legal land description or zoom in to the area of interest, go to the layers list, click detailed soil survey data or reconnaissance soil survey data, and then click the drop down button here, and it'll bring a list of all the different layers and interpretations we have. And then you would click on the dry land agricultural capability layer, and that will show you the agriculturability map for that area.
Okay, great. So for the soil surveying, the question was, do you do every section of land, or is it grouped together in a township or an RM?
We group them in a RM. So we conduct our surveying and release our reports on a RM basis. But we will, our goal is to survey every section of land within that RM to release the report.
Okay, and then so can someone request it to be done?
Not at this time, though we do like to hear that if there are, I guess, so if they are within a rural municipality that we are currently surveying in, yes, please call me and let me know that you would like your land done. So if you're in the RM of Broken Head or Sifton this summer, please contact me and let us know your legal land descriptions. And if you want to come and meet us in the field and see how these soils are classified, that would be great. However, if they are not located within one of those RMs, we still want to hear from you, as we are, as we finish up surveying in our current RMs, we are going to be looking for other rural municipalities to survey. And if we know that this detailed soil survey data is wanted in those RMs, that is one of the selection factors that goes into determining where we're going to survey next.
Okay, so if somebody was going to do a project, I think this is where the question was going, if somebody was going to do a project and they didn't have a detailed survey for their RM or their area, would you just use the reconnaissance one then?
At that point, I think if that's the only soil resource available, we'd have to use the reconnaissance one, or potentially hire a soil survey trained consultant. They could potentially help you out with that, or yeah, I don't want to offer up our soil services as if, because we have a lot of area to cover already, but there are different options to choose from as well.
Okay, so there are people out there that do it for a fee, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Okay, and do you, once that's done, do you get that information as well, or do you have to do your own as well?
If a consultant does do the detailed soil survey, sometimes they'll send it to us depending on what the project is for, such as potentially for an irrigation project. We'll generally review also what the consultant work has done. So it depends on the project and what the project is going to be used for.
Okay, and another question just came in. What is the funding source of this soil mapping project?
The funding source, I'll have to double check with my manager. I know this is it's a long-term program that the Manitoba Agriculture has been invested in. So I'll have to double check on that for you.
Okay. Good. Well, thanks, Megan. I think that was the last of the. Oh, no, one more. Does the land change, and how often does reclassification needed?
So the land and the soils, they generally don't change. It would take thousands of years for them to change. The reclassification is only needed where we have those reconnaissance soil survey maps produced, and then we want, with the intensification and expansion of agriculture within the province, and now knowing that the use of this detailed soil survey is important for lots of management decisions and land use planning, we'll go into those areas and reclassify the soils at a more detailed level. But once it's been classified, the soils generally won't change.
Okay, I think maybe where that question might have been going into is that let's say, for example, they had a saline issue and they put in tile drain and improved that issue, and that was a limiting factor to capability. Would that ever, I guess, make the change to improve the soil classification? I think I know where the question came from. I got I know of a producer that's been doing a fair bit of tile draining to reduce salinity, and was wondering if in the future his land would be classified because one of the limitations is salinity.
Right, and that would affect the agriculture capability.
Right.
So in my experience, I have not come across that yet, but soil salinity is a dynamic process. So with tile drainage, it is just, that is the process of drawing the salts down deeper, either off the field or deeper within the profile. So if that tile drainage was maybe ever removed, those salts would still be there and could potentially still be a limitation. So yeah, I'd have to consult with a more senior soil survey specialist if we would ever reclassify that soil over time and remove that salinity limitation.
Okay, probably
Hey.
go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, it's Marla here. I just wanted to pop in too, because to add, we have had cases previously where with major modifications, say with surface drainage on some very poorly drained soils in the Red River Valley, like the Osborne clays, where there has been a change to ag capability. So it can happen under extreme modifications, but like Megan said, in a situation with salinity, there's a lot going on that it might still be prone to salinity, but you know, if the tile stopped working or the tiles weren't there, it would just come back. So I just wanted to add that it has been possible and has been done in the past, but is sometimes a bit more complicated than just a simple, hey, it's not as saline anymore.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Marla.
that's a good point. And I think probably, and you mentioned crop insurance uses the information differently than the way you use some of or they use a portion of the information, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that might be one of the issues he was looking at as well. So great. Well, thanks, Megan. Some really good information, and thanks for this slide you got right there. That's got the links to the websites for finding these maps. There's a lot of really good information there. I think it takes some time to get used to using it. So I think you got to go in and practice and click on some buttons and see where it takes you. But there's definitely some good information there. So thanks again, Megan, for coming on today and presenting us with that information.
Great. Yes. Thanks, Lionel. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is go back to the crop talk, and we're going to go into first a brief description or talk about what's kind of happened over the past week and where we're sitting right now. And it was another good week of seeding across the province. I think it's just amazing how many acres can get planted in a day now, and when things are going good and conditions are good. So seeding conditions are good. However, these winds are starting to maybe create some issues for producers. We're seeing some of the soil starting to dry out, at least right to where we're putting the seed to right now, and a rain would be helpful to keep things going. Crop is still emerging very quickly, so I think that's something that needs to be key to a lot of producers as they're seeding, because we're getting a lot of crop in fast, and being that the crop is going in fast means that it's coming up fast, and we can easily fall behind in some of the other jobs that need being done. So definitely keep an eye out on that. When you look at our overall spring seeding from the report that came out yesterday for crop report, we're about 62% completed as a province, which is a fairly good jump from last week. When you look at what cereal crops are in, pretty much almost complete. I would be going in and there's some producers that may be looking at seeding some silage or green feed, or some later seeded crops for feed. But I think probably by the end of the week here, we'll see the majority of the cereal crops in. Peas are all in the ground, and the majority of them have emerged. And right now, about 50% of the canola has been planted, which is a big jump from last week as well. Have been talking to some producers that have been seeing some flea beetle activity. One of the comments producer made was it was more on the volunteer canola right now than it was on anything that they had planted. So I guess that's a good sign. But again, because crop is coming up fast, need to be keeping an eye on the canola crop as it's coming up. Soybeans, again, a lot of producers that are caught up on some of their canola are going into soybeans and getting some of them in. And right now we're looking at about 40 to 45% of the soybeans being planted. which is pretty good. And by the end of the week here, if conditions continue the way they are, we could see the majority of the soybean crop in as well. A lot of the corn or grain corn has been planted already, and right now, probably the majority of the corn left to plant is going to be for silage. So again, a lot of the grain corn has been done, and about 50% of the sunflowers. So in general, under good conditions, we can see several producers getting close to being done by the end of the week, which would bring us a lot closer to our 5-year average than we were last year, and definitely get the crop in good time. So when you look at where we are right now, we're in I guess the 4th week of May, and we're about 62% completed for 2023, which a 5-year average is 81%. So we're definitely close, but if we by the end of next week we could definitely be in that 91% complete, I would say, if conditions remain the same. So we could definitely catch right up to the 5-year average. So that's good. Yield responses, and we can definitely see where getting the crop in this week is important, because by next week we'll be seeing a significant drop in some of the yield potential of some of the crops. And just getting in it a little bit later is always a factor, but never you can't, I guess, say it's the God honest truth if you go by the lines, because depending on you look at last year with the later seeding, we did have some really good yields and some really good potential. It seems like maybe our growing season's gotten a little bit longer, so maybe we're seeing a little bit of a benefit from that as well. So with that, kind of a brief update of where we are right now, we're going to go into the crop scouting panel, and actually a comment that just came in. The 5-year average is a bit misleading, as we had several very dry years in those 5 years, which allowed some very early seeding, which is a really good comment. A lot of producers were able to get out early and get going, and then if you take the 5-year kind of moving average, it's definitely a good point to be made. So thanks. So for the first question today is going to go to Marla. Talking to a producer, and he was wondering about the availability of elemental sulfur applied in the spring, and then how much sulfur is needed for growing canola crop. So guess he's planting his canola and was wanting to use elemental, and is wondering how long and how quick it would break down for him to have use of it this year. So Marla, would you like to take a stab at that one?
You betcha. So elemental for canola. So the trick with elemental is that it needs time to physically weather and break down. And then microbes have to, like the actual granules have to break down. And then soil microbes actually oxidize it into sulfate. And only once it's been oxidized into that sulfate form can it be taken up by a plant. So elemental sulfur is not available. Makes it, nice and seed safe if you're putting it down with your canola, because it's not going to cause any toxicity issues. But that's, again, because of the fact that it's not available. If you are putting elemental or using elemental in canola, you want to make sure that you've put that down at least a full calendar year ahead of the canola crop for it to be available for plant uptake. So using elemental the year that you are growing canola is not going to be beneficial unless you're just trying to add more sulfur to a sulfur deficient soil, let's say. But if you're not actually getting it in at a time when the crop can use it, unfortunately. So if you're dealing with putting down sulfur with your canola, or dealing with sulfur, needs for canola for this year, you want that in that sulfate form, because that elemental is just not going to cut it. In terms of amount, what we found over the years with the new hybrids is that they tend to maybe not respond the same, but we still often use that kind of 7 or 8 to 1 N to S ratio when we're planting canola, only because we know that canola needs that sulfur. So canola and alfalfa are both really dependent on sulfur in order to get to yield. Rescue treatments can be done, but they might not get you to where you need in terms of full crop availability or crop yield. So if you are seeing a sulfate deficiency, or if you know you've got a soil that is prone to a sulfate deficiency, and low sulfate levels are going to be, on sandier soils, that kind of thing, then that's when you want to be planning to make sure that you've got that sulfur down. Otherwise, a lot of our soils have a lot of sulfate in them. Sulfates just happen to be part of that natural salt as well that is moving into soils and up and down with water. So sulfate's good. You want to get it down. It's a bit of an insurance. If you have really high sulfate levels, might not be as necessary, but it's an insurance because sometimes we can't trust the sulfate test, because of course the sulfate test, if it changes with salt levels, can be a little misleading, especially if you accidentally capture one saline area in a test across the field, because it can have really excess high levels of salinity and kind of throw off the rest of the test. So if you're doing soil testing regularly and your soils come back consistently low for sulfur, you can trust that. But if it comes back consistently high, you always still want to do a little bit of insurance by throwing that sulfate down when you're growing that canola. But if you're trusting elemental, you want to make sure that you've got that elemental on well in advance of your canola crop to make sure that it's available for that canola crop.
Okay, so would the elemental sulfur most likely be available for the following year?
Yeah, it'll be there for next year or the year after.
Okay.
Even 1 year, it depends on the year in terms of how well it weathers. There's a lot of variability, again, in whether or not it physically breaks down. If you're broadcasting sulfur, elemental sulfur is actually the best form, and then tilling it in. So it's the one fertilizer that you want to maximize contact with the soil, as opposed to everything else where we're trying to minimize contact with the soil, band it in. This is the one type of fertilizer that you actually want maximum soil contact. So broadcasting it on the surface, allowing it to physically weather, and then tilling it in so that it has contact with the microbes so that it can be made available. It's like the one kind of different thing in all the other types of fertilizer that we deal with. So again, you could seed place it, that will slow down its availability. But if you can broadcast and till it in after a bit of time to weather those on the surface, there's no loss mechanism. It's not going to gas off. It's not like ammonia or anything like that. It's just a very different fertilizer, and it takes a bit of a different management strategy.
Okay, so that would be maybe a good example why a lot of it's being broadcasted in the fall and then put on a seed canola in the spring, and that would be the first tillage would be the seeding in the spring, I guess.
Yeah, and if you're fall broadcasting for the following year, again, that's not a full calendar year in advance of the canola. So if you were broadcasting in the fall, I would want to be broadcasting it, say, the year before. Maybe you're growing wheat prior to your canola. So again, that weathering and that microbial process takes time and heat, and you don't get that through the winter. So again, it's 1+ calendar year timing. So if you want to be doing broadcasting of that elemental sulfur and then tilling that in, if you're doing that to supply the canola, you're actually putting in that in 2 falls prior to the canola being seeded. So you've got basically 1.5 years or almost 2 years of time to make sure that that's going to be actually oxidized into the sulfate form in time for the canola to take it up.
Okay, good point. I think that's something that maybe a lot of people need to remember as we go into fall and we start seeing some of this stuff being broadcasted. Okay, thanks, Marla. Kim, a couple of questions for you. How much of a factor is dust in herbicide application? Especially right now, we see a lot of dry fields and guys still doing burn-offs. One of the producers asked me, am I going to have all my wheel tracks coming up with weeds? And then after we got talking about mixing instructions, he's looking at putting some fertilizer in with his herbicide. So I just thought it'd be a good opportunity maybe to go and talk a little bit about our mixing order for instructions when we're going to be applying herbicides. So Kim, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Lionel. So we actually have on page 13 of our current guide to crop protection, the mixing order, and there's a couple of like acronyms that you can use. It's either whales or wham legs, depends on which one you want to use. But basically, it's a pretty specific mixing order. So when you are mixing things, we'll talk about that first, and then we're going to remind me if I don't come back to it to talk about the mixing in some fertilizer. So basically, when you're starting to mix herbicides, you basically fill the spray tank anywhere from 1/2 to 3/4. Most guys like to start at 1/2 if you've got like a really big fill. Really big line, like, if you're running 3-inch hoses and, you got a big pump and stuff. So it's a pretty fast fill on these. So make sure you've got all your products out and put them in the correct order. If you're putting a water conditioner in, that has to go in first. So if you were using something like a Crimson from Winfield, or if you're using some of the products like Simplicity, when you need to use the water conditioner with that one, you have to put that water conditioner in first, because that has to change, basically that has to change the water so that it makes the herbicide work. So we need to put that in first if you're doing water conditioners. And then if you're doing any fertilizer at this point, if it's allowed, and again, we're going to come back to this, then that goes in there in the water at the same time. And then after that, it's water dispersible granules. Again, if we're using that WHALES or that WHAM length acronym, so basically anything that's a dry flowable or a dry granular or a WDG, which is a wettable dry granule. So add those in slowly. Most of them, I can't say that for all of them, but most of them do mix very well. They mix a lot better than the old ones used to, but still add them in slowly, make sure they agitate. And sometimes I have been told too, with certain products, don't have the agitation on like a really, really high, like a big rolling boil. You want it to be agitating, but not like crazy agitation, because sometimes that doesn't work well. And so then anyways, after that, we add, when we're done putting our dry stuff in, then we start with the liquids, and then the liquids go in a certain order. So if you're using any oil dispersions, those are called ODs, or any liquid suspensions, which is a flowable or suspension concentrate, those go into the tank next. After that, any of your ECs or emulsions, and most of our products are ECs. That's an emulsifiable concentrate. So that's basically like an oil particle suspended in water. Those are the ones that turn the spray really milky looking when you mix it with the water, and those go in. And then your last thing to go in after that is your solutions, and things like your amines or your salts, and things like your high-low glyphosates go in as well at this point. And then the last thing you put in is surfactants or adjuvants. So when we come back to whether or not you can put fertilizer in or not, make sure you check with the herbicide company, because that can affect the herbicide badly, and sometimes you end up with a lot more burning on the plants. You have to be really careful when you're adding herbicides and fertilizers together. And I would urge that you check every single time you're going to do that. Check with your herbicide company and make sure that they are okay with that going in the spray tank. In a lot of cases, they will say, no, that's not a great idea. They just find there's just either too much of an interaction, or like I said, sometimes you'll actually get either the herbicide doesn't work as well, or you actually get too much, you'll get too much crop burning from having that fertilizer in the tank as well as the herbicide. So with that, again, that's on page 13 of our guide. And like I said, use the WHALES acronym or the WHAM legs acronym for when you're doing correct mixing order.
Okay, that's a great comment about putting them in order on your trailer before you start mixing too, because when you get going and all of a sudden think you're falling behind, sometimes you panic and you just start grabbing stuff and throwing it in. So I like that. That's a good idea. What about dust? Kim, any comments on dust and how it may affect how products work?
Yeah. There's not much you can do. And I know we've seen it in the really dry years. And even though we've had decent moisture, we haven't had moisture lately, and the fields are getting very dry, especially that top bit. I would fully expect to see, that dust in the wheel tracks is going to cause this, especially your glyphosate to not work when you're looking at that pre-burn. There's really not a lot you can do. You can go as slow as you can, and be very careful on the turning. But basically, if you are kicking up dust, that's going to inactivate that glyphosate, and there isn't going to be a lot you can do about that. That's just the way that product works. And again, just try to go as slow as possible. And that, ideally though, we've got really good warm soil conditions. We do have soil moisture. It's getting further and further down because we are getting fairly dry on the top. But I do think, we're getting late enough in May now, our crops are emerging and, everything looks really good. So if we get really good crop growth and get really good competition coming from that crop, then that'll help kind of counteract some of those places where we weren't able to get that burn off working as good as we wanted.
Okay, and just one more question has come in. How much wind is too windy to be spraying? And I know you need to be watching your booms and stuff, but the comment was, what is a safe wind speed before quitting spraying?
Yeah, like again, if you look in our guide to crop protection, same thing, like in that same area, like the beginning few pages there, like I think that's back, I'm just looking, that's just back on on page 12, talks about drift and things like that. And we say basically 10 miles an hour. So basically, and I will go maybe up to 20 kilometers an hour, which I think is like 11 or 12 miles an hour, but you need to be under that to really avoid drift. You want to have some bit of wind so that you have some mixing. You don't have, so especially you don't have any temperature inversions, but anything above 10 miles an hour, 10 or 12 miles an hour, you could start to see some type of a drift. And so there's really not a lot you can do other than not spray. I mean, most of us are using low drift nozzles. Those are great. And, keep the boom as low as you can to still get that overlap. When you get the sprayers get bigger and bigger and longer, wider and wider, that's hard to keep that boom right low to the ground, especially if you've got some uneven terrain and you get some bouncing, especially if you're going fairly fast. That is another point to keep the speed down. If you can keep your speed down and go a little bit slower, that'll certainly help because you can get that boom lower. But at the end of the day, if it's just too windy, it's too windy. And I got caught myself on some plots that I wanted to spray, and it's just been too windy. This morning, even at 6 a.m., it was too windy to spray. So I'm not spraying today. And, it's just the winds today are 30 kilometers an hour, gusting to 50, and you can't spray in that type of wind. It's just too much.
Okay, and then the last comment that just came in, what about adjusting pressure to make larger droplets?
Yeah, well, and again, you can do that. The problem with larger droplets then is coverage, and that's a great comment. You can adjust your pressure if you have a high pressure and a lot of fine droplets. Those are the ones that are the most vulnerable to drifting. The problem is, I guess it depends on what product you're trying to put on. Some of our products are contact products, and some of our burn-off products are, we're spraying a contact when we're doing a tank mix of our burn-off products. We've got contact products in with our glyphosate. And so we've got a systemic, which is glyphosate, and we've got a contact. So you have to get coverage with the contact. And right now we've got loads of weeds out there. They're all still really small, but there's lots of them. And the thing is, they're very small, and we're still hitting a lot of black dirt when we're spraying. So we want to be hitting those weeds. And when you do go to the larger droplet, you run the risk of that contact herbicide just not getting enough contact. So you can go to a really big coarse droplet. In fact, if we think about spraying dicamba, you have to spray on the ultra coarse nozzle droplets with that, because we don't want that to drift. But when you go to those bigger those bigger droplet sizes, you give up coverage. So it's a balance. You can do that, but you have to make sure you're still getting coverage. And to me, if you're going to do that, then up your water volume. Like, you got to be spraying minimum 10 gallons, and you can go higher as long as you've got a good water source. It just means more fill time. But I would be upping my water if I'm going to be doing that, to try to get more contact if you're going to have coarser droplet size.
Okay, great comments, Kim. Thanks. Kim, while you're on, do you want to mention about your big day tomorrow?
Oh yeah, Weed Seedling ID Day in conjunction with ACC in Brandon. So starts at 9 a.m. There's like coffee and registration at 9 a.m. And then I'll have a bit of a presentation from 9:30 till about 10:30, just going to show you all kinds of different things, all kinds of weeds. And at the end of the day, when that's done, we will head on up to the top of the hill to where their red barn is. And they have a really great weed garden up there where they've been growing weeds out. And so they've started a lot of the annuals from seed, and then there's actually some perennials and some biennials as well in some boxes already that are there, that are just, they're there yearly. So it's a great opportunity to, to just brush up on your weed ID. And there's lots to look at, and then there's lots of people, lots of networking and stuff. And so it's a really great training opportunity for a lot of the young people that are working for you guys. And as well, everybody's welcome to come. So it's open to everybody. And again, pre-registration is not required, but you can if you want to. And I think we've had that we've had the advertisement up before last week as well. I'm on my phone right now, so I can't see whether you've got it up again. But if you do need that, we can send it to you. But if you don't, again, you don't need to pre-register. Just show up at ACC, and the presentation and the coffee is down at the bottom of the hill in the ag buildings, and then up on the top of the hill is by the red barns where the weed ID is. So you are all are welcome to attend. Great,
and I do have the page up so that you can see the email address if they want to. So great, thanks, Kim.
If anybody can't morning, just text me and I'll send you a pin because I'll be there early. So again,
okay.
If somebody's having trouble, just text me. I think you guys, Lionel, you guys give out our numbers, and I'll send you a pin in the morning.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kim. And as Kim mentioned, our field crop production guides are available. And I think as we're getting into weed control, and we're going to be getting into maybe some insect control and then into disease issues, is definitely something you need to have in your possession. So they're available at all the ag service centers, or contact one of your local ag extension specialists and they can help you out there. Marla, any updates on the farm diagnostic or the crop diagnostic school, or just the farm day like we talked about last time?
No updates yet. I was told that I was expecting that we might have our registration set by now, but if not, it's obviously not done yet. So I'm going to follow up on that to have that hopefully ready by the end of the week. We will send that out. You can also then find that through the Manitoba government website. Farmer Day, people can continue to register for Farmer Day. So any farmers who are on the call who want to attend, again, July 7th is our specific Farmer Day. That day is being sponsored by the 3 commodity associations. They are each paying a portion to be able to cover that $75 fee. So if you are a non-member, you would pay $75, or if you're a member of some of them, they're each covering kind of 25% of $25 of each towards that $75. So anybody who wants to register for Farmer Day, email mbcropschool@gmail.com. Let us know your name, your farm name, and your membership of the 3 organizations, and we will sign you up. And if you are an agronomist looking to sign up, just keep an eye out. By next week, we for sure will be posting that. And hopefully that link will be sent out to our mailing list by the end of this week so people can start registering.
Great. Thanks, Marla. I mentioned last week that the environmental farm plan still has still are eligible to apply for some projects. So definitely keep that in mind. Some of the dates are going to be closing. So watch for the application deadlines. The information and contact information from our crop extension specialists throughout the province, our livestock extension people, the service centers across the province, their locations and their phone numbers. So if you've got any questions, looking for a weed guide, there's your information to get one of those. Our 1-800 numbers there. And thank you for joining. It was a good session today, and join us next week, May the 31st. And by that time, we'll be probably talking about a lot more seeding being completed, and some maybe potential issues with weed control as we start seeing some sprayers going to start controlling in crop weeds. So thanks again for attending, and see you next week.